Hi everyone. So today I wanted to go over just a couple of forgotten languages articles that have happened over the past, I think, six or 7 months at these ones. Well, I guess this one's from December, so closer to 9 to 10 months that these articles have been produced. This is, as was mentioned in my last video, kind of in the spirit of finding a place to connect and talk about the topics of FL here. So I just want to start going over articles. I know many years ago I described kind of going over some of them more in depth. I want to actually start doing that now. I want to start today, number one, with this article here, Anti-Beliefs in a Hyperconnected World, Who is the New Titan Corporation. This one, there's an interesting section in it about a conversation supposedly with some entity and the SEC that we'll talk about actually raised a Freedom of Information Request Act based on this article, so I thought this one would be interesting to go over. And then the other two are articles kind of on poverty in the global landscape. I thought those would be very interesting. Especially the last article isn't directly influenced our time, it's actually in the past, but I thought they were interesting topics, and we'll talk some more about them in depth. But yeah, so let's just get right into it. As per usual, I'll be reading these off and talking about them. As well, I did want to mention, some of you did friend me on Discord from the last video. I do believe I have now accepted everyone who did friend me from that, sent messages to your questions. So, if you didn't get a response, please check your Discord. And so we'll be able to do that, and we can shut down Steam here. So that's not a problem. Okay, sweet. So without further ado, Anti-Beliefs in a Hyperconnected World, Who's the New Titan Corporation? If you're so rich, why aren't you so smart? Yeah, so just kind of a funny one to start there. Did it come as a surprise that the large pharmaceutical companies are the biggest funders of geoengineering projects? Really? What the hell did you believe large pharmaceutical companies are selling? Health? If large pharmaceutical companies were able to eliminate the seasons, they would do so for a profit. This one I think is pretty interesting, just right off the bat. It's kind of bringing in more of that FL world view, about things are really more complex than they seem. And I think they're right. This is kind of the new world that we're going into. The data that companies have, it's the data economy because they use that data to, manipulate markets, create new products, stuff in that sense. Data is really a foundation for a lot of companies, and the data they have is extremely important. It's what they create. In the way companies. I watched an interesting video today, like McDonald's. They're actually very involved in app development and UI. With that app development, they probably know a lot more about e-commerce kind of UI and shopping than maybe a lot of actual e-commerce companies. And that's because they've got a lot of people. They introduced as early as 2008 electronic ordering platforms, where you order yourself, and so they've had years and years and years of information, to kind of create and upsell you these things, perfectly. That extends, of course, to actual e-commerce companies who also have done that on a large scale, but the McDonald's is just a big company. They serve globally, billions of people. So, over their course. So, they have a lot of data. They've got a ton of data about these things. That maybe even companies directly in those spaces. They're e-commerce companies who do not do the transaction numbers that McDonald's do. So. This is kind of a little example, kind of that FL world view. These companies may not actually be involved in the business that they say they're in on the surface, or the business that you see. There is even more important functional reasons why a hierarchical government systems fail as the world becomes increasingly hyperconnected and complex. The prevailing bureaucratic mode of operation of organizations at all levels of society assumes predictability and slow change in the world. These assumptions are largely obsolete today, let alone in a world approaching the brink of singularity. Such modus operandi will become less and less effective with the current trend of socio-technological development. Yeah, so this one's pretty on its face, I believe, just correct. We've seen the dissolution of bureaucratic structures. We're seeing the gig economy, decentralized finance, all these things pop up and becoming very big in society. There's even decentralized governance, for these things. And to put this into the FL worldview, very much they're of the opinion, by controlling, kind of the mechanisms that move society, they don't necessarily need to be bureaucratic and tell you what to do. they can create a society where you will be doing what they want you to do anyway. That's at least reading a lot of FL articles. That's something that they always try to get across. We don't know who the narrator is for this specific portion. We don't know if this is otherworldly beings, people in our timeline, people outside our timeline, relaying this information under who. So we can't really make assumptions there, where it's coming from. But essentially, we've seen from multiple different points of view from FL's articles. There are multiple different people who can, who can control kind of where the future lays without actually directly telling people what they have to do. You create a world where they do what they want you to do. So essentially, this section here, in my opinion, very, very short, is just saying what was right above, having one singular focused point of contact, which would be a system, where that's hierarchical, where one person at the top has to tell somebody else, who has to tell somebody else, who has to tell somebody else what to do. It's very, very limiting when everything is rapidly getting faster. There's more pieces connecting themselves, and you need to really be reflexive. You need to make, snap decisions. You don't have time to run it back up and down the chain of command every 5 seconds. That's not what is needed. You need people who are willing to make decisions then and there. This, of course, does not really fit into the first world corporate paradigm, that we've kind of created. So corporations, of course, need to change, governments need to change, etc. So a world government in a hyper-connected world is just infeasible. So this, I presume it's in the way that, people kind of view a new world order. Like there's not one person who tells people what the goal is, they all do it. People don't go to Bilderberg meetings to be told what to do, and they go out. And if you watch the Chantilly, you'll know Bilderberg meetings are important. It's where they share a lot of information, etc. About some of these things, or at least supposedly SV17Q shares information about a lot of its projects with corporate leaders and such, and important people, etc., whatever. Anyway, essentially, this is just saying, it's not the New World Order, quote unquote. Is not really feasible. And again, pushing it more towards the FL, giving more, more backing to the FL worldview of, you need to control kind of, the environment, which is, again, going back to the very first paragraph here, pharmaceutical companies are changing by not actually selling health. They're trying to control the environment. If you control the environment that people are in, you can control how they view information, how they process information, what they do with that information, without directly telling them what to do, which means they will make decisions that you want them to make. We are worried about disruptive technologies because we know if the system is pushed just slightly too hard, it shatters at a high cost. When it is subjected to novel stresses, there's little to gain but much to lose. Learn this: a technology is disruptive if it debases our belief that the world and humankind are beset by inherent limitations, and that the institutions as we have them today offer us a better standard of living and better outcomes than any time else in history. So this is actually a very dense paragraph here. We're going to analyze it starting from the back. So the back there, number one, is that the point of an actually disruptive technology is that it disrupts the status quo, and the status quo that is important to keep is that there are certain limitations that only the systems that currently exist have solved. I'm trying hard to find an example for this. I know there's a ton, none are coming to my brain at the exact moment, but essentially it would be democracy solves these problems. What's an issue? An issue is that the monarchies and the republics or whatever that have come before before the United States didn't really address the people's needs, and those are important because market forces, personal selection, again, decentralization, as the article is talking about, etc. These are facts of life. These things happen, and the only way that we've found as best way, as humanity is democracy. So whether that's true or not, maybe monarchies are the best way forward. Maybe philosopher kings are correct, but as far as whoever the narrator is. We can't be sure the narrator, I imagine the narrator for this is like SV17Q, the group. So presuming it is SV17Q, they're saying, yeah, we don't, if a philosopher king is the correct way forward for society, we don't care. We need society to function in a certain way, and for them to function that way, they have to believe that there are true limitations, that truly people need to be listened to. Maybe market dynamics, maybe it's not important to listen to your consumer base because what they want isn't important. What's important is getting the correct answer, moving forward, growth, etc. So very interesting there. And then the first part is all about, what a disruptive technology actually is. To them, something that's actually disruptive disrupts the status quo. Introducing such a technology doesn't actually benefit the established world order, which is, the way that people consume and interpret data, which we've been talking about, but so, something that actually challenges the status quo is actually disruptive. The technologies that we say are disruptive, like, say, crypto. Crypto, I think, is a great example. We've talked about before on Chantilly. Is crypto actually disruptive, or does it just entrench the data economy and these big corporations that own the data economy? So it may not actually, technologies that may be introduced as disruptive aren't actually that disruptive. They actually promote the status quo, which, increases decentralization, increases democracy, etc., etc. Maybe those things aren't actually good. Once again, with far more real-time surveillance capabilities possible than ever before, particularly with no latency, the question of how much illegality to allow will become a pressing question in both liberal and autocratic regimes. Societies will, for the first time, face the question of how absolutely laws should be enforced. Again, very interesting capability, and this is coming, with AI. One of the big things is, everyone will be able to be watched at all time, and you will be able to be tried for your crimes, in real time. And that's what they're saying with no latency here. The minute that you go over, 65 miles per hour, you're going 65.5 miles per hour, you can instantly be issued a ticket, have a ping on your phone, ping on your car. It will pop up, and say you've been fined XXX, when everyone has Teslas and everyone has iPads stuck in their car, whatever, no latency for that at all, and so that's the pressing question, do we let people go 70 miles per hour for 5 minutes, up to 70 miles per hour for 5 minutes before we issue them a ticket, do we instantly issue the ticket, do we issue ticket at all, etc., etc. So I think that's very, very interesting, very true point here. It will become a question. People will probably be like, well, if the second, I just accidentally hit my foot on the accelerator and went 65.5, I didn't mean to. And that will probably become very common and clog up the courts, so how much should they allow before, I imagine it'd be something like, okay, well, if you can do up to 70 miles per hour for up to 5 minutes, before you get issued a ticket, and, but if you're doing 71, you'll instantly get issued a ticket, etc., etc., so very interesting and very true and very scary. This is coming, in the future. You'll be able to be monitored at all times by AI, who will, without question, be able to, see that you committed a crime and charge you for it. Right now, I don't think people realize how much everyone commits crimes. You hear it all the time. Like some people everyone commits on average like 3 crimes a day or something like that is what I heard. I could totally believe it. I've got a lead foot. I speed around plus 5 miles per hour everywhere I go. I probably don't stop at every stop sign. Sometimes I'll roll through, etc. And more than that, there's bigger laws even. If something like 30% of the United States, buys a bag of Coke, should they instantly be, sent to jail and their life ruined over that because they were caught, or whatever. So, very interesting. We have institutions our mind cannot fully understand, and we use dark forces to modulate changes to our civilization because those changes must be incremental and not disruptive, and because we live in a fully hyperconnected world, which makes it impossible to isolate and confine a damaged subsystem. Any perturbation would be spread all across the entire system, and this is what we need to avoid. You constantly forget national security has been replaced by world security, and you also forget that the intelligence community is also a hyperconnected network which is also under our control. We cannot allow disruptive technologies to fall into the wrong hands, and this includes the hands of all your national intelligence services. So, kind of interesting. I'm not sure I can fully depict or realize this national intelligence services and how intelligence is important to this. Obviously, kind of the overarching theme here, is that very much, we cannot let at the wrong time, free energy become available. We cannot let the cure to cancer become available at the wrong time. Changes have to be incremental to space how people view society, and how they view their place in society and the growth of society, so that way everything goes lockstep. How we have to have a planned society. It's more important to us than, anything, or at least according to the speaker in this article, that stability is the only thing that society is based on, the only thing that the future is based on, is stability at all costs. It does not matter what we're giving up if we give up stability. So, no large language models in AI is not a disruptive technology. Neither is blockchain and cryptocurrency, nor the reconfigurable intelligent surfaces technology, smart dust and biofilms, or even hypersonic weapons. Not CRISPR and genetic editing. They are not disruptive technologies. The lip shift invoke algorithm is. So this is really interesting. They've talked about lip shift invoke. There's an article on it. We're not going to delve too much into prior, but as far as I recall, it's some sort of algorithm that LIAV produced, which is the AI that they talk about from time to time, which is how they can collapse society. I would go read up on it. If you search this term in the search box, it should bring up the other article on it. But they've got a big article talking about this. The first mention of it was, I think, a year or two ago or so. But anyway, as we talked about above, it's very much, blockchain, cryptocurrency, etc. All this tech, large language models. These play into, the overarching progress, quote unquote, of society, and not as much actually being disruptive. So, they play into the growth paradigm. They don't actually disrupt the status quo. What is the system called? It is called Palantir Enterprise Data Analytics Platform, or simply EDAP. What was your role in Project Denied? Answer: I was responsible for the interconnection of EDAP to LIAV. Question: you mean programming the interface subsystems? A, basically yes. Q, what do you mean by basically? A, I mean EDAP has chronological capability that allows investigators and examiners to create a timeline of activities and / events. EDAP users can then create a chronological sequence of events to generate visualizations and artifacts based on the data. My specific role was checking that LIAV generated timelines were correct. That is, that LIAV was not introducing wrong events. Question: why would LIAV do that anyway? A, because LIAV is a... Let me rephrase my question. In your view, does LIAV have the capability to modify or change any records held by NARA? A, no, I don't mean that. The records held by the National Archives and Records Administration are not accessible by LIAV. Question: so how would you know LIAV generated data does not align with the data held by NARA? Answer: because we have a local copy of NARA records. Question: I see. That's illegal, don't you? A, it is a company I work for, the one who has the local copy. I only... Question: please answer yes or no. Does your company have a local copy of NRA records? Answer: yes. Question: thank you. Please go to the next room and wait there for instructions. So, kind of an interesting back and forth. The next part will lead into what we were talking about before, but essentially it's supposed to be back and forth, and it's kind of showing how, how corrupt the governmental system has become, at least in the United States, where very much private companies have access to a lot of this data and can utilize it for their own purposes. And this particular purpose, I believe it's supposed to be LIAV is, creating, which is the AI, once again, is creating information based on accessible data, and they're fact checking if it's creating correct information or wrong ones because they have a copy of the information that they want it to generate, is what I presume is happening here. So going on to the next one. Question: I will read you now what your application form here states. Here, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC Office of Public Affairs, OPA, uses Pinterest, a web application that is a visual bookmarking tool, Pinboard, for public education purposes. Users can post their own images and videos, repost images from other users' Pinterest collections, or pin images found elsewhere on the web. Users can also follow other users and comment on and like other users' pins. Is this correct? Answer: yes, it is. Question: is all of the SEC's content on Pinterest also available on the existing SEC websites? Answer: yes, it is. Question: I see. Then can you please explain to us why is it that we haven't found these 23 images here anywhere on existing SEC websites? Answer: no, I cannot. Question: you mean you're not allowed to answer that, or you don't know? Answer: I don't know. Did you know those 23 images contain hidden privileged information on denied and denied financial operations? Answer: no, I didn't. Question: do you agree with the following statement? The rule will allow one person to decide to temporarily shut down trades on open exchanges while leaving dark pool activity open for business. Most retail investors do not have access to these hidden trading activities, and the privileged few who do will be able to profit off of the imbalance in the market that shutting off trade activity on an exchange would cause. Answer: yes, I agree. Question: we are happy you agree, because then you will understand that drastic measures against speculative short selling must be taken, and that we are sure you also agree that the only intrinsic holder of a stock should be permitted to sell the stock. Thanks. Please go to the next room and wait there for instructions. Answer: wait, I was responsible for uploading these images, but question: please go to the next room and wait there for instructions. So this one's interesting. We'll dive in to it a little bit. So I did file FOA Act for this. Here's a little snippet I've taken from the email I received back. Particularly, I asked for access to posts that have been removed from Pinterest from 2015 to 2023. 2015 is when I could see that it was created. As far as I can tell, no posts were deleted over that time period, which means if this section is in relation to modern day, the modern day SEC Pinterest, which you can go take a look at it, and you can take a look on the Wayback Machine, of all the posts. If it is in relation to, our actual modern day SEC, then none of the posts are talking about in here have been removed. I did not go as far to check if what images were not on other parts of the SEC, and I did not find, they grouped their pins. I did not find any grouped pin at 23 images. They have like diagrams, they have historical photos of moments in the SEC, etc. One thing to note though is that supposedly images in Pinterest that did contain, this hidden information, whoever the answer is for this didn't actually know that they did. So what that tells me at least is, even if nothing's been deleted, it may be sub-visual in the photos, it could be on the code in the photos. I know that there's programs you can use to install files in them. I am not a good crypto analyst, so I have not actually taken a look at or pulled any of the SEC photos to see if they, if they do contain anything hidden. Ostensibly, since whoever uploaded these didn't realize, in the images it could be like quote unquote like deep intelligence, etc., whatever, they're trying to get the information across state lines, whatever. Maybe an AI did it, I'm not here to speculate. All I know is I did raise a FOA on this. They did not find that anything was deleted. So if this is accurate in relation to our modern timeline, these images have supposedly not been removed from the SEC Pinterest, and they're still up, and they have the information somewhere that you visually wouldn't know that they have information on financial operations. So it could even be visual, we just don't know, so etc. That kind of ties into it. And then the other part is, the interesting part with the short selling here. We did see this very much with the GameStop saga, which happened, let's see, 2024 now. That happened, during COVID, 2020 and 2021. Very much. I think it's very interesting. They're saying that no short selling at all should happen. Whoever the speaker is who's questioning, ostensibly SV17Q again, or one of those groups, ostensibly is probably the narrator here, I would say, especially since it's referencing LIAV. They are of the opinion that short selling should not happen at all. You should only be allowed to long and sell the stock after you long. They don't think you should be able to borrow the stock. So I think that's very interesting. I also think, the dark exchanges, we did see that happen, kind of, dark exchange activity. I think GEX and DEX are the two indexes, GEX and DEX, that you can publicly access that show dark pool activity in general. They're reported, I think, by a number of exchanges that trade on dark pool. But, that activity, yeah. And specifically, what dark trading pools are really, is kind of bilateral in a sense, I would say, between you and the exchange, the dark pool. So, that's also, those are kind of hidden pools that, investors don't have access, that public investors don't have access to, bilateral exchanges. The market may be closed, but you can bilaterally exchange stocks, still with your counterparty. So, very, very interesting in general. They are against that, and most of retail was too. It became a big talking point, with GameStop in particular. So very interesting. I spent a lot of time looking at this. Did not care to look for the 23 images or anything like that, but yeah, they still could be up, and very interesting post there. Models have been developed to assist in making decisions about who gets jobs, loans, credit, entry to schools, and healthcare, to name a few. AI models' decisions and outcomes often are unexplainable. Part of this is inherent to the models themselves. The math is nonlinear and hyperdimensional from thousands and potentially billions of parameters. It's dynamic with the ability to change and learn from new data and from the model's use. We at the SEC are focused on identifying and prosecuting any form of fraud that might threaten investors, capital formation, or the markets more broadly, and this includes those firms and brokers using AI for generating investment recommendations to their customers, recommendations they don't even understand because nobody understands how the AI works internally. So yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely coming. Automated investment advice has already been around. A lot of times, if you're going through, one of the big platforms, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, or whatever, for financial advice, they will stick you in just an automated trading, finance already scales, but you'll get automated recommendations, and this does happen. So essentially, basically, it just means the SEC, anything that doesn't agree with their, vision of how financial recommendations should be made, may be locked down on. So a little tidbit there for sure. Many of the challenges to financial stability that AI poses requires new thinking on system-wide or macro-prudential policy interventions. So this may be coming, certainly. This would say the next systematic challenge that the global financial system will face, could be AI related, because essentially rather than pay a bunch of analysts a bunch of money, because analysts do make a ton of money for financial firms, you should just hire an AI, rather than import analysts, which is another article that Forgotten Languages did just a little bit ago, was talking about how with the coming of AI, society will actually turn politically against immigration at this point in time. At this point in time, it's only for immigration because it poses an economic growth opportunity, for a lot of the businesses, and that may change, that may reverse. So, the Securities and Exchange Commission today announced the filing of a settled enforcement action in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, charging the Titan Corporation, a San Diego, California-based military intelligence and communications company, with violating the Anti-Bribery, Internal Controls, and Books Records provision of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. Simultaneously with the filing of the Commission's complaint, and without admitting or denying its allegations, Titan consented to the entry of a final judgment permanently enjoining it from future violations of the FCPA and requiring it, one, to pay $15.479 million in disgorgement prejudgment interest, and two, to pay $13 million penalty, which will be deemed satisfied by Titan's payment of criminal fines of that amount in parallel proceedings brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California and the U.S. Department of Justice Fraud Section, and three, to retain independent counsel to... Yeah, so sorry, kind of skipping over that a little bit just because the dog was barking, so we're going to cut that, but yeah, not much to say here. Mostly it just shows kind of the two-facedness of the government here, choosing which corporations have to pay fines, how they're going to pay fines, and for what reasons it maybe isn't, or it maybe isn't enforced equally, and what they do enforce is kind of based on, what's needed, quote unquote, rather than what's actually legal, which once again ties into the above, where with the coming of AI, we may need different ways of viewing crime. So this is our culture, and that's why we believe it, but has no scientific basis. These superficial studies go back no further than the Neolithic, when property was invented, when communities began to depend on fields and livestock that required territories. Human iniquity is not natural, it is learned, and that is the true hope because we can unlearn. The danger is AI systems do learn too, but nobody taught them to unlearn. Yes, so I think that one's super interesting. That ties into a very broad spectrum of analysis on AI that Forgotten Languages often puts forth, which is that AIs are being taught to be greedy. It's all these bad things. That we're teaching them. That they're actually programmed into them. They learn through the data sets. They're still a program. They still learn. This is what happens. So we'll never be able to break those chains. We're ultimately they will always treat us as greedy people or whatever, etc. When in actuality, the FL is saying, that it's not actually our natural state of humanity. That we one person owns everyone else. That's not actually natural, and we can unlearn it. So yeah, overall, very good article, very interesting. I thought it was worth mentioning, especially because of the FOA request. Which kind of shows some of how this may be true, but how a lot of it's hard to really verify like that, at least in universe with FL, they have it completely right, it's on point here, if even the person who uploaded it wouldn't know, so how the hell are we going to find, what the SEC website is saying? So let's move on. These two, I think, are interesting. We'll talk about them. Let's start with Poems from the Slum World. Paradox of nuclear war, potential positive impacts on Earth's ecosystem. No one knows yet the social temperature at which the new city's poverty would spontaneously combust. 95% of the final explosion of humanity will occur in the urban areas of developing countries, whose population will double to nearly 4 billion over the next generation. In fact, the combined urban population of China, India, and Brazil is already roughly equal to that of Europe plus North America. The most celebrated result will be the blossoming of new megacities in populations in excess of 8 million, and even more spectacularly, hypercities with more than 20 million inhabitants. So very interesting. I think a key here is the final explosion of humanity. It postulates that within our lifetimes, here we will have the final leg up on the global population chart, which is a very scary thought. Our society's been predicated for the last however long, last 200 years, since the Industrial Revolution. Pretty much, that population only goes up, and it has, if you look at the world population map, it has exponentially gone up. If this is the last leg up, that's pretty insane. And, they're saying that this will mostly occur in urban areas of developing countries, which this article goes into, but that's, very, very interesting. We're already seeing that, kind of more, in the past it was rural areas, rural China, they just kept feeding them, and they had kids and kids and kids, rural India, etc., same thing. It's postulating, though, that, most areas on Earth will be urban, but they will also experience a population explosion, which I think is very interesting. The the kind of global environment that would lead to that. We do have Belt and Road Initiative in China, and everything that's going on. So I think it's interesting. We'll keep reading. Kinshasa, and I'm gonna butcher some of these city names, but Kinshasa, Khartoum, Dar es Salaam, Dhaka, and Lima are growing prodigiously despite the ruin of their import substitution industries, the shrinking of their public sectors, and the downward mobility of their middle classes. The global forces pushing people out of the countryside, mechanization in Java and India, food imports in Mexico, Haitian and Kenya, civil war and drought across Africa and everywhere else, the concentration of small plots of large landholdings, competition from large-scale agribusiness, seem to sustain urbanization, even as the attraction of the city is drastically tempered by debt and economic crisis. So very interesting, very interesting paragraph. All these big cities, they're saying, for a variety of reasons, I think very interesting is the import of food myself. Civil war and drought makes sense, but mechanization, but it speaks for itself. More job opportunities. Food imports I find very interesting. I think that implies, Mexico, and it implies it here, the ruin of their import substitution industries. That essentially means, a lot of these, especially Mexico, where it says food imports are responsible for pushing of poor people into the urban areas of Mexico, are due to them, they no longer grow enough food themselves, they have to import it. So in order for people to feed themselves, they have to be in urban centers where the imports are coming in and being distributed, so very interesting. And it's saying, also, of course, main theme of FL for a lot of it, large-scale agribusiness, so these large global corporations, are kind of pushing people out of the rural areas too, especially as they're being, once again, mechanized. They're saying in Java and India. Mechanization twofold. One, it means the jobs are in the city, and two, it means that, the jobs that were in the countryside are getting pushed out, because you only need so many farmers, when there's enough mechanization to feed everyone, and et cetera, et cetera. You thought it was a good idea to steal land from peasants and indigenous people and turn entire countries into large estates, and now you find yourself with megacities of millions of impoverished, lower-class people, the very cities you want to nuke, because that is what you have done through your scavenger investment funds, to create huge pockets of poverty. You've turned your world into a slum world. A very visceral paragraph in my mind, it shows, very much the state of the world. The state of the world is, capital corporations, financial corporations have really distorted, society, and we've created large slums of people. We've turned we've turned the growth of society into the growth of poverty, worldwide, because that's just how, capital functions. You collect all the resources from everyone, send them up the chain, and there is, investment funds, that own the majority of the resources, and then there's everyone else who is impoverished, so very interesting to me, especially being in the first world. You don't get exposed to this, I feel like, enough, or not at least the reality of poverty, is not exposed, I think, to a lot of first worlders a lot of the time. They argue about feeling impoverished, but really they're not. We're not impoverished. There's a lot that goes into that, hiding that, but we're not. Rapid urban growth in context of structural adjustment, currency devaluation, and public spending cuts have been an inevitable recipe for the mass production of hyper-degraded urban areas. These areas will never be nuked. They are so fragile that natural disasters, especially earthquakes and torrential rains, are foreseen for them. In any case, even if the direct impact of nuclear bombs does not reach them, the probability of post-attack survival is nil. So very interesting, especially because they talked about we wanted to nuke them earlier, but it's basically saying, they will not survive being nuked. These are already very insecure areas. The people in them very impoverished. Food is not guaranteed. Water is not guaranteed. Health is not guaranteed. None of these things are guaranteed, and they're right on the edge. Which FL does talk about in other articles. Talks about these huge cities on the Pacific Rim that China has created. That are wiped out. Just like that with tsunamis and stuff, earthquakes, natural disasters that will happen on the Pacific Rim, completely wipe out these huge cities, and how it's, so dumb. Our society relies on these huge cities, on the Pacific Rim that then, go belly up because of natural disasters that we can't stop. There may be more than 250,000 hyper-degraded urban areas on Earth. The 5 major metropolises of South Asia alone, Karachi, Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, and Dhaka, contain about 15,000 distinct hyper-degraded urban areas with a total population of more than 20 million. An even larger urban squalor population crowds the urbanizing coastline of West Africa, while other huge conurbations of poverty spread across Anatolia and the Ethiopian highlands along the base of the Andes and the Himalayas, or are located in critical areas such as Mexico, Johannesburg, Manila, and Sao Paulo. And of course, most cover the banks of the Amazon, Niger, Congo, Nile, Tigris, Ganges, Irrawaddy, and Mekong rivers. For these cities, the simulation shows destruction rates of 99.78%, and the new ecosystem showing, cars, trash, slums in general. Yeah, slums, it's the article from the Slum World. And very interesting, it's correct. Well, let's just keep going here for a bit. Lagos is about the largest node in the 70 million people slum corridor stretching from Abidjan to Ibadan, and is probably the largest uninterrupted footprint of urban poverty on Earth. Yeah, so this will be the Gold Coast area, or the Ivory Coast, I guess, is what it's called. But that coast kind of along Africa. If you look up the maps, yes, it's essentially saying that this is just what capitalism does. It's the outcome for for everybody having a great life. In America, who's not an immigrant, everybody living a great middle class life. The system we've created, just creates urban poverty like a blight across the world. It happens. It's just here. This is the society that we've created. And this is what it does. 2 billion of hyper-degraded urban dwellers by 2030 or 2040 is a monstrous, almost incomprehensible prospect, but urban poverty overlaps and exceeds these areas per se. Designing a nuclear war whose end result would be to decrease the global population by only 2 billion people would clearly be a failure. This once was a city. Nuclear war, and this probably looks like from a natural disaster, but anyway. Nuclear war, when sampling from an artificial normal distribution, results in an average human survival of 60 years into the future, starting from the present, before a civilization-ending disaster. While climate change results in an average human survival time of 193 years, the simulation based on impact from asteroids results in an average of 1,754 years. Since the risk from an asteroid impact could be considered to reside mostly in the far future, it can be concluded that nuclear war, climate change, and pandemics are presently the most prominent threats to humanity. No caste system in India during the nuclear winter. Yes. The next article we'll go into, I want to talk about it. I think it's a good article, but we can relate it back if I remember, of course. But the beauty of the nuclear option is that you solve in one fell swoop the problem of climate change and overpopulation. The downside is that it would take about 500 years for the environment to recover. The effects would be a significant surface darkening over many weeks, sub-freezing land temperature persisting for up to several months, large perturbations in global circulation patterns, and dramatic changes in local weather and precipitation rates. A harsh nuclear winter in any season, near freezing summer temperatures for years could eliminate most of humanity's food production. So now we get into kind of the dark side of this article. Very clearly they're talking about what would happen if we actually had nuclear war, and what would happen in these areas. And basically what they talked about above, these, 99.78 destruction rate, they're saying that these large slums all across the world, the result of global capitalism, creating large slums like these all over the world, is that they are destroying the environment, and the best way to stop them, maybe nuking them. They're not going to survive if you do that. It's not really their fault, but unfortunately, but they are, destroying the globe. So. SBO6N has vehemently advocated its best option, the design and deployment of Black Death-like pandemic, combined with the use of a gemniovirus that would wipe out at least 72% of crops. But that option does not address climate change reversal. It is also unclear whether the final kill rate would be 84%, which is what has been estimated as necessary. Look, there are 195 countries in the world today. 9 of them are considered to be nuclear weapon states. Life insurance against nuclear war is very simple. We are in a rhythmic world where the mycelia of greed are strongly interconnected. Except for Israel, all other nations are ruled by rich people who have interests and investments in every other nuclear state, ensuring that none of them want a nuclear war. This means that not even by accident can a nuclear war be started. It would require overthrowing the rich or interfering in the decision-making system. In our opinion, the nuclear option is not viable unless we replace the rich with an artificial intelligence system. Only then could the program's big reset of the planet be guaranteed. As long as the rich have the nuclear button in their possession, they will not push it, and hyper-degraded cities will grow, and inequality will continue. So very interesting, as you can see with the top one, very prominent in the Chantilly articles that we talked about is, gemnioviruses and viruses in general. It's talked about, I think in 2100, the development of gemnioviruses to target crops in Russia specifically. But it's something a lot of people don't think about. But yes, gemniovirus targeting food, crops for the majority of humanity. The majority of crops, in particular, like rice, that would end up feeding these mega cities, which are collapsing the environment. Would very much, they would collapse if they were faced with famines like this. So they're kind of resting on an edge there. And then the second one, interesting to note that Israel is not involved in the kind of interconnection of global GDP, but this is very true. Countries, particularly China, nuclear guaranteed country, controls as of the moment 700 billion in U.S. bonds. Japan controls something, I think 3 trillion in U.S. bonds. The rich of the world are interconnected because they have investments in all of the nuclear capable. Yeah, so this does tie into what we were talking about above, as much as, it is the system, the rich create these megacities of poverty, it is part of the system. Nobody, can be that rich, and the system cannot be sustained without these megacities of poverty, which are destroying the environment. So, and all these countries are interconnected, the rich are interconnected, they have investments in each other, and so, it's essentially them versus the population, and that's very true. We can even see that in the modern world. It's unfortunately, in my opinion, not a big enough. Class warfare is still not big. I feel like in these areas, it is somewhat, but it's the rich people use it like, oh well, you should be attacking these other rich people, rather than, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it's very, very interesting for sure. I know this is heresy and anathema for you, but nuclear war is the only way you have to get rid of slavery and global inequality. Only the Great Reset, a new rebirth, a fresh start, can free the billions of poor from the clutches of a greedy few hundred. The city, a nest of greedy people. All in all, SB17Q advocacy for nuclear war solution is based on the clearly positive effects of such an event. More specifically, SB17Q cites the reduction of human impact on ecosystems, the so-called rewilding effect, which foresees the resurgence of biodiversity as flora and fauna adapt to the new conditions. The fact that areas affected by nuclear war could experience a rapid transition from barren landscapes to diverse ecosystems, potentially leading to the establishment of new ecological communities, the beneficial cooling effects on the climate, the efficient carbon sequestration due to the collapse of industrial activities, the emergence of new species and increased biodiversity over time, the emergence of new species better adapted to the post-war environment, the removal of certain species, particularly humans, due to the nuclear fallout that will alter predator-prey relationships, allowing for the resurgence of previously suppressed species, and the growth of new plant life. But SV-17Q, the idea of a reset for Sol 3 cannot be seen as justification for nuclear conflict for just one reason. We know nuclear war already wiped out pre-Cambrian techno-civilizations. We know ecosystems recovered and that there was a so-called Cambrian life explosion. We also know what happened later on when hominids appeared on Sol 3. If we do not want to repeat the mistake of the Neogene period, we must ensure that the next intelligent species on Sol 3 is a radically different biology. They should have one at all. So this is really interesting. Gets into kind of, more is this in our current timeline, etc. Basically, SV-17Q is saying, yes, we need nuclear war to save the planet. It is worth it to overthrow current rulers, install AI systems, and, have nuclear war break out, because that will save the environment, and it will create, and then we go into this, pre-Cambrian civilizations already existed, which is very interesting. FL doesn't talk about this a lot. I certainly have not heard of pre-Cambrian life before this article, but it supposes, that hundreds of million years ago there were techno-civilizations already on Earth. So, maybe we're not the first, and they implore that if nuclear war does happen, humanity will be wiped out, and, we will have, different species, take over the Earth after this, which is, kind of interesting. Unfortunately means we will not be around to see that, unfortunately, which would be very interesting, see what they're like, but we'll not be around for that. But it does tell me a lot. I noticed after the very first video I made 4 or 5 years ago, very much FL kind of soured on humanity after that. Very much while I was reading FL, for the very first, kind of what I got out of that was there was a lot of hope. There was hope that things could turn around, that the environment could turn around, that humanity could make the right choices. But very much FL and these articles have kind of soured on that, in my opinion. Reading over the last, 6 or 7 years, I've kind of seen a change, particularly in the last 3 or 4, where they're more sour on humanity. They feel like they're looking for particular articles like this one, where SV-17Q is looking at post-human Earth, and is looking at removing humanity from the Earth, and is looking at, mitigating the damage done by climate change. Very much FL has soured on humanity, which is, not a great thing when you're human to hear. They've soured, and they don't see a future for humanity on Earth. So you'll see a lot of those articles, in my opinion, over the past 3 or 4 years, where they're very, very against humanity actually continuing to live on Earth. So not a great one, but so let's get on to this article. This article is not so much logical, it's more poetic, in my opinion, and I really have enjoyed it. It's really come to mind a lot over the past couple months, so I thought it'd be a great one to end off on. It kind of ties into the other two. And of all the times the plague broke out in our cities, it did so in the ports where ships full of merchandise obtained by trade or plunder docked, because the Black Death was but the signature of a world of merchants, who were in reality pirates, and soldiers who became armed rabble. I'm not sure if this comes from anywhere. It may. I've not really searched for it, but ostensibly it's taken from the viewpoint of someone during the Black Death. So, and the rest of this article is too. What better companion animal can a man who behaves like vermin have than the infectious rat that spreads the plague? And in what else can we place our faith but in that which punishes rich and poor, peasants and nobles, shepherds and cardinals alike? For us, Black Death was the great equalizer, and we gave ourselves to it with absolute devotion. Very poetic statement, the poor people of the time, sure, they were getting decimated, but so were the rich. It really leveled the playing field. And a lot of articles do say that the Black Death was the cause of the Renaissance. It's very widely regarded that it raised labor costs, for the first time. It wasn't just kings and fiefs that had all the resources and money. For the first time there was kind of a growing middle class, and there was the growing thought that people, labor was valuable. So very, very interesting, very poetic. There will be no science, no medicine, no army that can stop the plague, neither now nor in the future. And this because humanity itself is a plague, affected by greed, avarice, lust, which turns everything it touches into merchandise. The streets of the cities will be filled with corpses, today and in the future, until it is learned once and for all that every civilization that turns children into sexual objects, women into prostitutes, men into slaves, and beliefs into merchandise deserves to disappear. So this, this kind of gives a very, for me at least, a very visceral look into kind of, with the others, with the other ones, it kind of visceral look into like, what it would be like back then. I particularly like this first part here. I kind of forgot to talk about it a little bit, but it's saying how the merchants, were kind of pirates. It's very visceral. The merchants were robbing the population, and when they would pull in, the Black Death would hop off in the form of rats on their ships, and infect the local population. They, these merchants all they wanted was wealth, but they lived in a world of death, and greed and all these bad things, and theirs was a very bleak reality, where these sailors, and these merchant ships, would really, the land and everything would be destroyed by these people, going around. Very interesting. And this one, saying very much, this is what it was back then, before the plague. These merchant ships were bringing in this, these, these goods and selling them, and everything was for sale, and, that greed, lust, all these horrible things were very much, in vogue, and they, it contributed kind of to the downfall, which it did. If you look, it was very particularly, the Black Death did target very much kind of that, that echelon. So, and yes, it made everyone equal, etc. All right. It is necessary for the rich, the nobles, the aristocrats, the kings and princesses to live in luxurious mansions and palaces by exploiting a legion of millions of wretched people. Is it not a plague that devastates and annihilates cities a blessing? And doesn't a doctor who cures a rich man deserve to be impaled next to him? And those wretches who put themselves at the service of the rich and noble, brandishing swords to defend a palace of which they will never be a part, do they not equally deserve to be infected in dying, writhing pain while expelling stinking liquids from all the orifices of their bodies? So yes, again, very visceral. That's why I like this article. It's very poetic, very visual, very much, but it gives a very good insight. These people, these kingdoms, live off exploiting. They only are able to emerge because they exploit everyone beneath them. And very much this is a curse they brought upon themselves. Where they are, getting destroyed. The people who defend them are no better off. Everyone is leveled, everyone's decimated, particularly with dying, writhing, expelling stinking liquids, very, very visual. Verily I say unto you, that you should pull down the statues of your mighty ones and erect in their place a statue to the black rat, now and in the future. So yes, very interesting. Again, it makes me wonder who the narrator for this article really is. I don't know if we'll know. I kind of did a cursory search but couldn't find anything, But very much, whoever the narrator is very much, it's very poetic. You should worship the rat. It's made your lives better. You may feel bad now, but in reality, it's put you on equal footing. It's kind of decimated all of these horrible things keeping your society back. So I thought I really like this article, and I really feel it ties off the other two, in a more poetic way, showing you very much, back then, being in the eyes of someone going through the Black Death, what their thoughts would have been, and kind of what your thoughts should have been, really, how it turned out. It's someone who kind of could see back then, but also knows what happened, in my opinion, is kind of the narrator for this one. So, awesome. So that was the last article we had for today. So we'll call it for now. Again, please reach out to me on Discord, ask Saduri if you have any questions or want to go over anything. Everyone who messaged me last time, I believe, messaged you back. So, perfect. Questions, let me know, of course. We'll do more articles. I think maybe next month from now, I will try to hit a few. There haven't been very many articles in the past month or 2 months that really caught my eye, but again, we have 4 years of articles to catch up on. So awesome. I will talk to you guys later.